Hello and welcome back to EducateMe MD. I am Dr. Sarah Soltz, a general pediatrician, and today we'll discuss how screen time can affect the brains of kids of all ages. We'll talk mostly about the youngest kids, but touch a little bit on some older kid things as well. I will go into uncommon depth on common topics to explain the ordinary in a new way, so please join us. Greetings, I'm Dr. Sarah Soltz, and last week I discussed the new law banning all cell phones in Texas public schools, and today I wanted to expand on that and discuss the effects of screen time on younger ages from birth to 12 years old. The next episode will be the last part of this series, and I'll talk more about adolescence and social media and mental health. This episode is for all the parents and grandparents and educators who want to give our kids the best chance for success. This episode ended up being a little bit longer than my others because there's so much I wanted to cover, and it was really hard to narrow it down. I could have easily talked for an hour, but I hope you find it helpful. Did you know that staring at a screen can actually change the structure of your brain? It's crazy, but as we have more sophisticated ways of measuring brain activity, the more we can determine these effects. The brain is a miraculous organ that's constantly trying to change and grow new connections. It can also be scary to think that by watching a video or playing a game, kids are changing their brain structure, and that can affect how quickly they learn, how well they interact socially, and even their ability to be creative. If you want your child to grow up to be their best and brightest self, then you have to learn to limit and monitor their screen time. The companies that create these devices and videos want to get kids attached early and keep them watching as much as possible. It's their primary goal, right? Because that is how their business makes money. Nobody's placing limits on how much and what content your child is watching unless you do it. Even Steve Jobs, who led Apple to the creation of the iPhone, and Bill Gates, the creator of Microsoft, have spoken out about how they limited their kids' access to phones and iPads. Remember, it's often not your kid's fault that they have a hard time getting off devices. The device is designed to draw them in and keep them connected. So as their leader in life, you have to be extra diligent to find healthy limits. First, I want to start by defining the term screen time. Originally, it was a term for the running time or length of a movie or show, but it's now the most common term for any time spent looking at a TV, phone, tablet, computer, or even a VR headset. My son once got caught watching YouTube on a screen on our smart fridge because we had locked everything else down. This can be to watch shows, play games, surf social media, scroll videos, do work, or even make video calls. Even schoolwork on a computer, as discussed some in the last episode, can lead to less focus, can be harder on the eyes, and to lower grades. For the most part, the total amount of time spent seems to be the biggest factor connected to changes in the brain. But as we do more nuanced research, we can start to break down where the content and engagement with this screen can really make a difference. So I wanted to break this down by ages, and I'm going to start with the youngest kids. From birth to 5 years old is an amazing time because kids grow and change so fast. They go from completely dependent to walking, talking, and doing a lot of other things independently. As you can imagine, a ton of changes happen during this time too. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, as I'll abbreviate it from here on out, has long held the recommendation for no screen time at all under the age of 2. Maybe except for the occasional video chat with family. And then from 2 to 5 years old, only 1 hour per day. And then the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, AACAP, agrees with this recommendation, and studies have consistently shown that more than 2 hours per day for kids over 5 has more negative effects than good. I mentioned earlier that watching screens and playing games can actually change a person's brain structure, and I want to dig into that a bit more. There have been multiple studies looking at this issue in older teens and adults, but in 2022, there was an article published by doctors at Cincinnati Children's Hospital that did MRI scans on the brains of over 50 kids aged 3 to 5 years old. And the kids with the highest amount of screen time were already starting to show changes from the baseline. The brain itself has a similar shape and structure at any age, and different parts of the brain are responsible for different functions and activities, like your movement is in an area here, your speech, your vision's controlled in the back, memories in the center. The bulges or ridges of the brain are called gyri, and the top layer of those gyri are your gray matter, and that's called the cerebral cortex. And this is the area that they measured in the study. They called it the cortical thickness for the thickness of that cerebral cortex. So when they measured the cortical thickness, they know what functions would be affected by changes in those areas of the brain. The cortical thickness, or CT, was thicker in areas used for visual processing speed, but thinner or underdeveloped in more complex areas of the brain that control language development, reading skills, and social skills. Let me repeat that again. The changes seen in the brain of kids as young as 3 years old show faster processing of what they see, their visual processing, but worse abilities in speaking, reading, and social skills. This means the kids who spend a lot of time looking at screens may be able to visually process what they see faster or better, but may not be able to talk about it or relate to others about what they have seen. Which do you think is more important? I know this is a lot of science, but I just want to make one more point before moving on. The brain is fascinating for another reason, because it has something called neuroplasticity. This refers to the fact that the brain is always pruning some connections that it is not using and then building new ones. This is the same concept as pruning a tree and allowing the strongest branches to continue to grow and produce the most fruit. But the brain does it all by itself. The problem is when the brain is told to make the wrong pathways stronger and then prune the ones we really need. A 2-year-old child actually has a lot more connections in the brain than they ultimately need, and this is when the process of pruning really begins. We used to think it mostly stopped after puberty, but we have shown in more recent research that it continues your whole life, just at a slower rate. The first study above that I mentioned about brain structure was using traditional MRI, but there's a different type of scan called a functional MRI that can look at what areas of the brain are active while people are doing different activities. I'm going to show a picture of just what an example of that looks like as well. Research using functional MRI scans have shown us that as much as we may enjoy them, videos unfortunately prune the wrong branches in the brain. This is what causes the thinning in some areas and growth in others that we saw in the first study we discussed. You might be wondering, if videos prune the wrong areas, then what prunes the right areas? This would be the activities that engage kids, such as playing with toys, but especially reading. Reading picture books, reading chapter books, especially fiction, probably because it engages the creative portion of the brain as well, but all reading showed a positive influence. Now, I feel like this is a good segue to shift from brain structure to content and how we allow our kids to use screen time. I think when kids are under 5 years old, it's easier to tell what shows are age appropriate. They're slower paced, do not have violence, maybe teach something like numbers or how to be kind, but it can definitely be more challenging as kids get older. They're often attracted to shows or games with more action or noise. Multiple studies have confirmed that violent video games lead to more aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. In a big meta-analysis, this effect was greatest in Caucasians, and the researchers also saw a decrease in empathy and prosocial behavior, meaning they weren't as good in social situations. When trying to decide the best games or shows, looking at sources such as common sense media can help to have an idea of the content and potential risks and benefits. Sometimes just getting support from other parents who are also trying to set the same limits can help you to feel like you're not the only one keeping your child from playing a popular game like Fortnite for when my son was younger, or refusing to give your 10-year-old a phone. The newest AAP guidelines help support this too, by focusing more on how we utilize screen time than just setting limits on total time. I have one friend who found this change frustrating because it's not as black and white, and for her it led to more confusion about what to do. If you can interact with your child while they're watching something, then it can offset some of the changes that are seen above. If you think about it, it makes sense that if a kid has to think about what they're watching and explain it to you, then they will activate the areas of their brain that have to do with memory and communication. It can be tempting to leave kids alone or use it as devices as a babysitter to keep them distracted when you have something to do. But it's much healthier for kids to have more time for creative, free play without electronic toys or screens during those times. All right. Next, I want to spend some time talking about things we can do to help limit our dependence on these devices. If you've made it this far into the episode, I appreciate it. And now we're going to get to the helpful tips portion about what to do at home. First, we mentioned that reading books is one of the best things you can do. So how about finding books on this topic to create discussion around it? For young kids, one book could be Alex, the Boy Who Watched Too Much TV. It can teach children about the negative side of too much screen time and lead to a conversation about what is healthy and setting clear limits. For elementary age kids, Screen Smart Sam Battles the Bad Habit Monsters could be a good option. I do not have a personal connection to these books, but I felt they were appropriate based on my research. Other ideas that I will first just list off and then explain in more detail include not eating in front of the TV or devices, keeping devices out of the bedrooms, and creating phone-free times and zones in your house to allow opportunities for undistracted interactions with each other. The reason I recommend not eating in front of TV or device is fairly obvious. The obesity epidemic is a well-documented problem, and studies have shown that kids eat more when they're distracted or in front of a device and often tend to choose worse foods. And if it's a mealtime, they're not working on their interactions with other people. So keeping devices out of the bedrooms can be a tough subject for some families. I think it helps to start by setting an example as the parents. In our house, I do not have a TV in my room, and I plug my phone in the kitchen each night when I go to bed. My husband is often on call overnight, so he has his next to his bed, but is not using it before going to sleep. For young kids, all screen time should be supervised, so it is best if they can be in a main room that's more visible. And for older kids, they should also have to bring any personal devices out of their room at least 1 hour before bedtime to give their minds time to wind down before sleep. Studies have shown that kids who keep devices in their room overnight get less sleep, and I think we can all agree on how important sleep is at all ages. Even a half hour less of sleep per night on average can make a difference in how well kids feel and focus. Again, the phone-free activities and zones in the house need to be respected by all family members, and setting new rules can be an opportunity for parents to consider cutting back on their screen time as well. A great goal is to have one screen-free meal together per day. This allows time to communicate about good and bad things from the day, it strengthens family bonds, and can encourage more healthy eating. Kids in the 5 to 12 year age range often have a deep curiosity about the world and don't see learning as work. They enjoy games that teach them something, and you can use this time off screen to discuss topics that interest them, such as facts about wild animals, how to manage money, even Pokemon or dinosaurs, whatever gets them talking and curious. Maybe print off an activity sheet or find a relevant book in the library. I want to make one more science point before I end this episode. Dopamine is a chemical that's released by the brain during enjoyable activities, and watching a favorite show or winning a video game can definitely cause a dopamine release that leads kids to want that activity more and more. It can make them upset and aggressive when they're not allowed to have it and make them not want to do any other activities. If this sounds like an addiction, it can definitely be very similar and a very strong feeling for some kids, even if they've had appropriate limits in their younger years. Sometimes if kids are having this experience, it can be good to take a screen break for an extended period, like a month or two. We did this once when our kids were about 10 and 12 for about 3 months, and it was really helpful. They were asking for screens all the time and had a hard time getting off, and it seemed like they forgot how to do anything else. It was a great reset, and it forced us to use our free time differently. The kids went outside more, and we'd play board games as a family instead of putting on a movie. It may seem extreme or impossible for your family, but I challenge you to try it, especially if you notice these same behaviors. It also made them realize I was serious when I said I could take screens away completely if they didn't use them more appropriately. There's also a trend right now called 1,000 hours outside, and the goal is like it sounds, to track your outdoor time and try to build up to 1,000 hours. It might take a while, but that is the point, to make it a habit to get outside, because the sun gives kids vital nutrients like vitamin D, and when they're more tired from being outside, they'll sleep better at night. If you don't want to try for 1,000 hours, then another option could be to track the amount of time spent on devices and choose to spend the same amount of time outside or doing something active. If taking a break from screens is not an option for your family and you are concerned about how your child's screen time is affecting their mood or behavior, then you could consider using one of the AAP's resources called the Family Media Plan. You can answer questions on their website. There's a link in the resources section below. And the website will create a personalized plan for your family. Regardless of how you do it, setting some clear expectations and sticking to them will make a huge difference in your child's life. It's also important to remember that you may get to a point that you need professional help, and you can always reach out to your pediatrician or counselor or somebody to help you decide how to proceed if you feel that you've gotten to that point. As I wrap up this episode, I know I've stated a lot of problems about media use, and this has been hard for me because I really don't like to focus on the negative, and I do want to share that, but I really want to share this information because I think it's something a lot of people don't know. On the positive side, certain video games have been shown to improve problem solving and flexible thinking, and so it can be good to look for ones that are associated with that. I have a handout from the ABCD group. That's a big ongoing nationwide study that I mentioned last time that talks about the pros and cons of media use. So if you would like a copy of that, it is linked in the show notes, and you could also leave a comment and I'll reach out. Overall, what I hope people will take away from this discussion is that studies do show that over 2 hours of screen time a day is correlated with problems with behavior and mood. This was confirmed with a large meta-analysis with over 150,000 kids in 2022. Kids' brains are literally shaped by the stories and input that they are given. So we have to start with healthy limits when they're young. Moving their bodies, eating a healthy diet, and getting enough sleep are so crucial to staying healthy and limiting behavior problems. In the next episode, I'll dive into the effects of social media and more details about screen time on mental health and anxiety, especially in adolescents and young adults. You'll see that when these things are not limited, we end up with a generation of kids who are struggling in so many ways. So please check it out. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching or listening, and I hope you have a great day. A disclaimer, the information contained in this podcast is strictly informational, and even though I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and you should always consult with your own healthcare team before making significant changes to your care. Thank you.